Good afternoon. I'm Reverend Dave Thompson. I'd like to welcome you back to our Civil Human Bible study. I'm a civil human minister, so what that means is that I focus my ministry on building human peace and common ground. As a civil human minister, the way that I'm approaching our studies today, the scripture studies, is really twofold. The first is that I want to be a human. So I'm approaching these scriptures as a human being, looking to find those teachings that I feel can be applied across the board to all humans. The second thing that I want to do is to do that in a civil manner. And by that I mean that I want to respect those shared basic human needs that we all possess. For instance, the need to believe our own creed, to be independent from the control of others, to be able to vote for those who will have control over us, to intimately love someone of our own choosing, and last, to live and let live. I'm so happy to have you back. We're continuing our Bible study in Matthew chapter 14. Yesterday we talked about, it was King Herod and how he killed John the Baptist. We're actually getting a very touching reflection from Jesus, his response to this. So let's go ahead and jump into the text. And today I want to also mention this Bible that I have is one that my father gave me when I graduated high school. He spent a year going through the scriptures and writing in the margins, thoughts or reflections, and then underlining things that he thought were relevant or important for me to remember. And so there is one quote today, something he wrote in the margins that I do want to share. As we read the scriptures, at the end I'll go ahead and read that little remark from him. So again, this Matthew chapter 14, starting in verse 13 and 14. When Jesus heard about the death of John the Baptist, that is, he departed from there by boat to a deserted place by himself. But when the multitudes heard it, they followed him on foot from the cities. And when Jesus went out, he saw a great multitude, and he was moved with compassion for them, and healed their sick. In the margins, my father has written something, and I want to share with you. I will try to read the writing as best I can. Jesus healed not to demonstrate his power, but because he had compassion. Let his compassion fill your heart. Look upon those around you in need with a heart to meet that need on Jesus' behalf. If you try to minister in compassion, then Jesus can then demonstrate his power through you. Thanks, Dad. So these are just two small scriptures, and they're actually one of the more unique scriptures. In the account of Matthew, who was one of the original students of Jesus, who wrote this account of Jesus, he gives a very sort of touching picture here. So I want to back up just a little bit to sort of keep, those of you who are joining for the first time, our last study, we talked about King Herod, who's over this region that Jesus lives in and is doing most of his ministry in. And Herod, who had, some conflict with another minister and sort of preacher guy who lived in the wilderness and was highly praised by everybody. The king ends up killing John the Baptist, only to satisfy some random request from his daughter that he loved very much, and decided that he would kill this guy in order to appease his daughter. And so Jesus has just heard of this. Now, I also want to point out something. We aren't exactly sure, really, but it's possible that Jesus is the cousin of John the Baptist. His mother, Elizabeth, is related to Jesus' mother, Mary. And so it's likely that the two are cousins, so they probably grew up around each other. Even if that's not the case, they certainly were ministerial friends, vocational friends. And Jesus, remember, he goes to John the Baptist. Of all the people out there, he ignores the Pharisees, doesn't go to the temple, doesn't go to all the people that he's supposed to go to in their society. He goes out into the wilderness to meet with this guy who eats wild locusts, grasshoppers and honey, and dresses in sackcloth and in burlap, basically. And he is baptized by him. And that's how Jesus starts his ministry. So this is really probably a very traumatic time for Jesus. And remember, he is still right now wandering through the countryside right now along the Sea of Galilee in Israel, and he's ministering to people. People are coming to him. He's teaching his disciples. He's teaching the people who are coming to him. It's a very tiring job just in and of itself, because he's having to serve people all day and oftentimes into the night. And so we get this really unique picture of Jesus who actually steps out. He gets into this boat and then he takes it out into the water to get away from the people. And it says that he went into this desolate place. And by this, it simply means it was a place that wasn't developed. The word here really connotes an idea of a lack of resources and people. So it was unpopulated. Let's just call it the wilderness, right? This is a place where it's just nature, and that's it. No people, no distractions. It's clear that Jesus was hit probably by a traumatic experience at this point, right? He's lost somebody very dear to him. And on top of that, he's also exhausted. He's exhausted from his ministry and now having to deal with this very difficult time, this very difficult trauma. And then what happens? The people end up following him anyway. Somehow they get word that Jesus landed somewhere else. And so all these people from all these different towns come walking over, tracing through the woods to get to Jesus. And then he comes upon them, just probably startled out of, a grove of trees or something, I don't know. And then all of a sudden there's this vast amount of people who have come in need of his help. And this is something that I really appreciate about the way that Jesus does ministry and the way that Jesus works and helps people. It says that he has compassion. And, this word compassion, it really means being moved to have sympathy for somebody. And actually what it means is that he was moved in his innards, is literally what the word means, right? His guts, essentially. And in Israel at this time, this ancient people, remember, they don't have a concept of the mind being the sort of the seat of everything. We understand brain chemistry and how, emotions work and how the brain ties together, or at least learning a lot about it. And at this time, all they knew is that when they fell in love or when they were hurt, they would get butterflies in their stomach or their stomach would sink. You get that feeling when you have those emotional experiences. So for them, that's really where emotions lie in this ancient world. And so when Jesus has compassion on him, it isn't like he's saying, okay, gosh, I got to do my job. I've got this calling, Jesus, and so I got to be Jesus to people. And so he's doing it out of obligation. No, actually, he's moved. He has a love and a pity and a mercy on these people. And that is really insightful. And I want to talk a little bit about that right at the end, to talk about how we can kind of tie into that to help fuel us and to help bring us out of these difficult and traumatic times in our own lives. And then, Jesus went and healed the sick. He's the thing. I want to give you a few walkaway points. I really feel like this is a timely message for myself and for a number of other people out there. We're all facing COVID. We've got, in America, we've got the elections coming up in a couple of months. It looks like it's going to be crazy. And that in and of itself is overwhelming. And then add to it our work and our jobs, our family, the people that need us and depend on us and who need our focus and our love. Now add to that a traumatic experience. It makes for a recipe for disaster. And it always seems like when it rains, it pours. We all have gone through these times, and if you haven't, it's almost a guarantee that life will pass you a traumatic event at some point. The challenge is figuring out how to deal with trauma. How do we deal with all of the stress that's coming out at us in normal life and in the chaos of today and this traumatic event? I want to talk about one element that, even though in the ancient world they didn't really have these kind of characterizations of mental states, it's clear that Jesus is so overwrought by and burdened by this emotional impact of losing his friend and his co-worker, really, that he has to pull himself away. A lot of times we begin in our society to qualify that as depression, and in many cases it can be. Sometimes it's a short depression, sometimes it's a long depression. But one thing I loved, and somebody mentioned this word to me, and I really felt it was exactly what is needed. They just basically played with the word depression, meaning deep rest. Jesus is smart enough to know that he's got to take some rest. He needs to check out. He needs to put himself aside, if for a moment, to just be able to reflect on this thing. And the way that our minds work, right? We know now a lot about the chemicals of the brain and how they work to store and deal with memories. And when a traumatic event happens for us, it gets stored in our brains in this sort of holding pattern. And if we don't deal with it, it just stays there. And what's remarkable about it is it can stay with people for years, in their whole lives in some events. And they never deal with it because it's difficult to deal with trauma. It is overwhelming because it hurts. And it produces emotions and sensations that we don't like. But the only way to deal with PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome, or to deal with these kinds of traumas is to bring them slowly into our lives and to surround us by people with people who we can talk to about it, who we can relay this information with, so that we can begin to associate love, companionship, acceptance, compassion alongside of this traumatic event. And our brain begins to reassociate it, not with stress hormones, but with better emotions, better associations. And sometimes we need to try to get away. We need to take that moment to get in a boat, go out to the water, and head into the wilderness. If that means a quick hike, I do that a lot if I can. Because, there are moments that I have overwhelmed sense of dread of something happening. I have traumatic events that happen to me, and getting away is sometimes one of the best things, even for a short part. The one thing I want to close on, and something I think is often overlooked when we look at this passage, but it mentions that Jesus saw the crowds, right? Everybody was coming to him yet again for more help, for more healing, for more instruction. He has compassion on them. And then he starts getting back to work. What I love about this is that this is really a powerful exercise, and I have found really powerful in being able to get myself past all the trauma and the overwhelmingness. We have at our heart, we have at our soul, this ability to feel love. It is a powerful healing in us. When we can tune into that, when we can find a way to feel compassion for somebody, when we have the ability to look past all of our trauma, to find somebody who is hurting and to be there for them and to provide some sense of love for them, it gives this really powerful result, a flood of positive dopamine in our brains, to speak, neurochemically. It gives us a sense of love for ourselves, and it gives us just a wind in our sails so we can continue to do the work. Because, we all have to do our jobs, and other people need our help too. I want to thank you for joining me today. It's been sort of a different conversation, but I think a necessary one. A lot of us are facing a lot of stress right now, and with COVID and the chaos of everything going on around us, I want to encourage you to reach out to the people who do care about you and allow them the opportunity to hear what's going on in your heart and in your mind, and allow them to also be touched by you. Find the compassion in them as well. Again, I want to thank you so much for being a part of this Bible study. It really does encourage me when you are part of it, but then also I learn from you and I grow from you as well. And so I thank you for putting comments in below the video, or sending me your messages as some of you have done. And I just want to tell you how important it has been to me as a person to be able to grow. So tomorrow, when we meet again, live at noon, I want to say to you that I love you. And I hope that you choose to love yourself. It's the only love that we have any control over in this world. And now I invite you to join me as we go about the rest of our days, giving our neighbors the same love. Thank you.